Hi class, these are my PowerPoint slides for bias. I just want to let you know this is going to be a two-part video because it's really long. So I'm going to do part one and I'm going to stop the video and then I have a part two to do. And they're both of the videos are going to be posted on this page on bias. And all my PowerPoint slides are in one file at the bottom on a PDF copy if you want to download them and print them out for yourself. So we're going to start by defining bias. What is bias? A bias is a strong leaning in one side, either positive or negative. So a person could have a positive bias by really loving animals or flowers. A person who loves animals may have lots of cats and dogs and treat cats and dogs really beautifully and have a positive bias towards them. A person who loves flowers may have flowers all over his or her house and has positive bias because loves different types of flowers. That's a positive bias. They have good feelings and they're very biased. Grandparents are also very biased towards their grandchildren, and they have positive, nice feeling thoughts about them, and they spoil them to death and give them all the love and attention that they can want. A negative bias can include a lot of other facets. It could include someone who has a prejudice against a certain group of people, or a negative bias against dirty streets, or a negative bias against noisy, polluted areas. And so that bias can clearly come out in a person's language. Good readers must be aware of the bias in the authors they read. Sometimes an author states his or her bias, but most of the time bias is implied by the author. A critical reader must study the line of reasoning presented by the author and then decide if the author has bias. Now, if the author does not directly state his or her bias and you have to, the bias is implied, it's very dicey, because if it's implied, then you're taking a guess. You're just guessing based on the language and what you see and what you hear. So you don't want to be affirmative and say, yes, I know this is the author's bias, unless the author directly states it. And you don't want to create any other story or scenario on your own about the bias. You just want to stick to whatever you hear and see. So we're going to talk about connotative and denotative language. So when you look up a word in the dictionary, you are determining its exact meaning without suggestions or implications that it may have taken on. This is called denotative language. Connotative language is when a word refers to the ideas and feelings suggested by a word. Connotative language can have negative or positive meanings. So we're going to look at some examples of that in the next page, but what I wanted to do is I'm looking at the Merriam-Webster dictionary here on my desk, and if I look up the word love, which is the denotation of the word love, it says warm attachment, attraction based on sexual desire, a loved person, a beloved person, unselfish, loyal, benevolent, a score of 0 in tennis. So that's another definition. Well, not the kind of love that we're looking at. So if you look at the word love, a lot of us take that meaning to be warm affection, that first denotative definition. And then also there's the definition of the word in the tennis match. But if you're looking at the denotative language, what you're doing is you're looking at the dictionary definition. The connotative language is how you interpret the word. So some people may define love as evil spelled backwards. Or some people might think that love is something that they just don't think they would ever find in their lives. And so they look at it so love is not expressed in a nice, warm way. And so connotative language can reveal a lot of a person's bias. But you need to still focus on the words and the way the person words his or her language. So if someone says that love is evil spelled backwards, you can say that this person has a negative view of love, but you can't say, well, he probably had a bad relationship, because you don't know. And maybe he just saw that, or maybe he's just making an observation, or maybe that was just the moment in which he lived. So you can't make up a whole other story besides what you hear and see. So when we're talking about connotative and denotative language, we're just looking at the language that's presented to us. We're not creating any scenarios or stories beyond what we're given. Here's some examples of connotative language. So let's look at the first set. Which has the positive connotation? Fat, chubby, or full-figured? Just think about that for yourself. Clean, freak, neat, or well-organized. So think about these groups of words and which words pop out as the positive connotation. So the answers are full-figured and well-organized. Full-figured is much more positive than to say fat or chubby, and well-organized is much more positive to say clean, freak, or neat. Euphemism. A euphemism is a word usually substituted for another word that has an unfavorable or evil word. For example, if someone dies, you may want to say passed away rather than is dead to make the situation sound kinder. Because euphemisms substitute unkind words with kinder words, they may be misleading in formal writing. So you want to be really careful. Now, if you go to a funeral, you don't want to say, well, I'm sorry your father is dead. You would say, I'm really sorry that your father passed away. But if you were going to be writing some sort of formal paper and you wanted to be really clear that the person is dead, you would have to use that word. So euphemisms take away a little bit of clarity. They also bring up some bias in individuals. So what is the euphemism here? We've got this little cartoon. I'm going to have to let you go. Santa is saying that to the elves. So let you go is a euphemism for termination, which is the proper real word. Another euphemism is you got fired. That's actually not a kinder way to say to let you go, but it's something that you all may be familiar with. So the kinder euphemism would be to say I have to let you go. And so it creates, when you use euphemisms, it creates a lack of tension. So it doesn't sound as bad as saying you've been terminated when you say I have to let you go. But there's a little bias here because there's fear of confrontation or maybe other types of ideas that are going through the person's head. And so their bias does come out with euphemisms as well. All right, so in the next video, I'm going to be talking about logical fallacies and errors in argument. And we'll be looking at that in part 2 of bias. Okay, bye for now.